Hello and welcome everyone to Dax Electronic Repair. Today we're going to be replacing a LCD screen on the original Nintendo Switch. So not the OLED, not the what's the other one? The light. We're not. This is for the original one. All right, so you can see they're broken. The digitizer is not broken, so we're not replacing that, but we will have to take it off. So this is, I'm actually doing a little bit more work than I need to do here, but I did it anyway, just to get all the parts out of the way. You do not have to take the controller retaining brackets off like I'm doing here. You only really need to take the middle screw out, which gets rid of the back, or lets the back come off. So extra work, whatever. Now you know how to completely disassemble it. We'll be doing that as well. You basically have to tear it down until nothing, or down to board out, all sorts of, you'll see. Anyway, all right. There should be a screw there. There is not. Take your game out, if there is one in there. It's also missing the kickstand, as you can see there. There are two screws on the bottom you have to take out. Right now we're just getting everything taken out so we can take the back plate off, which is how we access everything. There is the SD card in there, so you got to pop that puppy out of there. And the screw came out right with it. As you can see, there's a little tiny screw there. Again, as always, make a pattern on however you're organizing these things, your screws, so you can put them back in the right place in the right order. All right, these four, one in each corner, are actually tri-tip screws. So you have to have a special screwdriver, or a bit rather. So make sure you do. It is a Y. It's called a tri-tip or a Y. Y00 or something. Anyway, all right. So you get all those screws out, and you can lift the back up and off. We've got a heat plate, bracket, whatever you want to call it, retaining who's what's it. On the back here, we're going to be taking that off. That has several screws that hold it down. They're all just standard Phillips. You actually don't have to take off the ones for the headphone jack right now either, but you might as well, because it's got to come off anyway, which is the one I just did on the black retainer. That one will let you take the SD card reader out, which I'll show you how to do here in a second. So it lifts up from the bottom, and then you can pop it out. It's just a little ribbon cable. And there's one in the middle, and now you got all of them out, and you can get rid of this bracket, which also serves as kind of a cooling dealie as well. You can see the cool thermal paste right there. We will be replacing that. Some parts that broke off as they were coming apart. This is not uncommon. Some of these are not treated. They get dropped quite a bit. Anyway, battery cable off first, obviously. Always do that. And those are the retaining brackets, or the Joy-Con retainers. And because I took them off, I just didn't want them flopping around there on those ribbon cables, so I just went ahead and took that one off, which was just clipped in, as you saw. Same deal on the other side. It's just in the middle there. These are all clips. The little release clips. You have to angle them up. Be real careful with them. They do kind of pivot on a hinge deal, but if you break that hinge, you're in big trouble, because they don't. It's really hard for the actual ribbon cable to retain the cable if it's broken off. All right, so now we just got to start taking stuff apart. What we'll be doing first is just going and getting all the screws out of the motherboard so we can pick it up and off. So we will need to take it off of there. And the black ones are, except for those two, are for the motherboard. You got one there. You got two that hold down the charging port that are not black. Next one will be, again, make a pattern on whatever surface you're putting your bolts. I use a magnetic mat so I can make an exact layout of where those go. All right, next we're going to go ahead and take the CPU, GPU cooling off of there. As you can see, it's got a cooler that goes up to that fan, and the copper really the heat dissipates as the fan. It sucks it out of the heat for the processors. Pry up on it. Probably shouldn't be doing it with a screwdriver unless you're awesome like me. Use a plastic spudger if you can. And it's kind of taped down with this foam stuff. You just kind of cut it a little bit. You lift it up and out, kind of angles up. And then you can get your heat pipe off of there. You saw me take the two screws out of the fan. There's also a third one underneath that top bracket for what the game card is. So we can't take that out yet. We got to release some more things and take some more screws out before we do that. All right, and so right now we're just going through and taking all the components off of the board. Those are the two speakers. Just gonna kind of pull them out of there. They're pretty strong, but you really want to try and get them by the plastic so you don't pull them out. That cable, ribbon cable, is actually for the LCD. Goes through to the front. Go ahead and take out the last motherboard screw, and then we've got another one on this daughter board that is where the game card reader, and it also has the connector for the digitizer on it as well. So we take that, pop that guy up. It's there's a little ribbon cable that goes into the board with the socket, you can see. And that digitizer is hooked there too. Oh, and then we got the last one. I'm sorry, I said the last one last time. I was wrong. There's one hiding underneath that bracket. The same with the fan. And then, for real, that's all of them. Fan also has a ribbon cable. It disconnects that way. That is another cable for the power and volume buttons. It goes the other way. I'm sorry, that one is the one for the power buttons right there. And then finally, the LCD cable as well. There's actually two of them, but that's the big one. Then you got a couple Wi-Fi output antennas that you got to pop off too. So once you do all that, you can lift it up and out. You kind of want to start from the top, which is upside. It's upside down right here. So you want to get your LCD ribbon cable off of there. I wasn't super gentle with that one, but it didn't matter because it is not being reused. All right, motherboard is out. So next step is to flip it over. That's all the disassembly we're going to need to do. We can keep the battery in, we can keep the speakers in and the buttons in. All that can stay on. All right, now we flip it over and we need to pry the digitizer off of there. We're going super speed on this one because it does take a while. You can put it on a heat plate. You can use a hot air gun like I'm doing, or you can use, like, they've got the iFixit like pillow deals, that whatever they call them, to loosen the adhesive under there. That's all that's holding the digitizer on. So work your way around, get a nice amount of heat on it. You don't want to pry too much on this without enough heat, because it will crack and break, and then you are replacing that as well. This digitizer was fine. Has a little bit of scuffs and scrapes, but the customer just wanted to do the LCD, so that's what we did, and we just reused this one. So go around, take your time. It's a prying and a patience game. On this one. Slowly, slowly. Watch the corners. The ribbon cable that connects this to it is on the opposite side of where I am right now. So when you're facing up, it's going to be on the right side. So keep that in mind when you're putting things in there to pry. You don't want to pry on the wrong side and cut your LCD, or I'm sorry, your digitizer ribbon cable, because then you will have to replace it. Again, digitizer is what turns your touch input into touch on the Vigigame. All right, so that comes up and out. You can see there's the ribbon cable, and the adhesive is still good, so we put that back. And this is actually not held in with anything, so it just sits underneath there. You can actually see the damage there. But it comes up and out. There's actually 2 cables, one for each spot. There are holes, and so we put the new one in. Now this part's a little bit tricky, because you got to get that little one down and in, but you also have to get it so it sticks back up on the other side for when, because it needs to go on top of the motherboard. I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a minute. Yeah, as you can see, it's down in there, and it needs to be up. So make sure it's completely up. Kind of bend it up a little bit, but don't go crazy with it, so that it'll stay there while you're putting the motherboard back in. Because really, the best way to do it is to put the digitizer back on before you put the motherboard on, because then it holds the screen in place and it's not walking around. Ideally, you would have tested this on the motherboard before, or your new screen, your new LCD that we're looking at here, on the motherboard before we installed it, to make sure everything was right on it. This one was good. I just didn't show that step. All right, so when you're ready to go, pull up your cover. I always do that last for obvious reasons. You can see how much I've touched it already. And you don't want any fingerprints on the LCD itself. And then you got to angle that in. Camera's kind of refocusing. Okay, there we go. You angle your ribbon cable in for the digitizer. And make sure you didn't touch the back of that digitizer either. Make sure there's no dust, dirt, grime in between. Flip it over and it's going to stay in place. So you did it. You put a new thing in it. But now we got to put everything back together. And I'm going to show you the way. Because this is the way. I get sued by Disney. I might get sued by Disney. Who knows? They don't care about me. All right. When you're putting the motherboard back in, you kind of want to angle it down with the charging port in first. It just slides in that way. And you also have to make sure all your ribbon cables are up above it where they need to go. So you've got your, and also your little Wi-Fi antennae. And there is your buttons. Make sure your cables for your speakers are above and that the board sits down exactly where the screws are and is not moving around. See, it kind of, as I was shifting it, they went and hit again. So you gotta kind of do it, not a couple times, but definitely you gotta be real careful because you don't want to start putting screws in and crushing things, and it's not gonna sit right anyway. Alright, so that looks good. All the screw mount holes are flush and in the right place. So the best way to do this is to get a couple screws in first. Just making sure everything's sitting. Getting ahead of myself. Make sure everything is sitting where it needs to sit. That black one actually goes underneath, so that is one that does go underneath. And then that one obviously went back down. So it's a little bit fiddly. Just got to be aware of where each cable is and where it needs to be. And finally, you can pick up a screw or two. There's our black one, another black one. These are all the motherboard mounts. Did all the black ones first. And then you got your charging port ones that are silver. And now you can start hooking up all of your accessories. This one is tricky. I fiddled with it for 10 minutes at least. I cut that out because I didn't want you to see it, and also it makes me crazy. But I've tried it in a bunch of different ways. It just doesn't want to cooperate. So when you're doing it, just have some patience, because you will need it. You almost have to pre-bend it and put it in. But yeah, you can see me just having a hard time. That is the for the LCD itself. And finally I got it. Alright, so once we do that, we need to put our fan in, because we got that screw that's underneath that bracket, if you remember from earlier. So the fan needs to go in first so we can get that screw in. So put that guy in. Has those three big fat screws. Make sure your ribbon cable is sitting where it needs to, all the way in. Lock her down. Looks like I already did the one right next to it, which was the for the top buttons, the power and the volume. Alright, and there is our card reader, which also has our digitizer connector, which I've already hooked up. You can see there. Same deal. That one's a lot easier because you can do it from an angle. Put your one screw right in there. And your final motherboard screw right there. Alright, so we got a retaining bracket for the headphone speaker, or a headphone jack rather, and we took that off before, so now we're just going to put it back on. And now you're going to clean off all your thermal paste off of the bottom and top of that heatsink, because we're going to be replacing both of them. So you only need to put it on the bottom of it for right now, because we're going to be screwing it down. I'll just use Arctic Silver ceramic, whatever the The heck, that one kind of angles in. And line it up with the 3 holes. And again, that is for cooling your processors. Oh, and I put a little bit on top. Three screws go back in. And then we put our Joy-Con brackets back on, which again, unnecessary step for what we were doing, but we did it anyway. These aren't too bad. They're just a little bit fiddly because they are kind of rolled up in a weird way, but once you get them lined up, you can then recoil them up to fit in the void where it's supposed to. You just got to be careful not to twist it too much or in the wrong direction. As you can see, it's kind of a little bit fiddly, but that's why you shouldn't have done it in the first place. Dax repair, you dummy. Alright, so then you put in all however many screws, 1, 2, 4 screws, the top 2 and the bottom 2, because the middle one is the one that retains the back plate. Same deal on this side, just kind of goes in a longer way. I think originally it was underneath that power cord or battery power adapter, or power cord plug, but it doesn't matter. So here's some unnecessary things that I was doing. And now it's back to where it is supposed to be. All right, and then you just get that guy back in. I try and there's little tabs on either side of most of these, and you just gotta kind of nicely, gently push them in on each side. You can use a pair of pliers, or that sort of thing too, like not needle nose. Tweezers rather, to do that too. All right, so we're just going to do another test. Make sure everything's working properly. Make sure that's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Everything's looking good, so we go ahead and start buttoning it all back up. There's the back of the top, opposite of where that white thermal paste I put on is. Now I cleaned it off. We're going to put a little bit more on there, and that's too much, so I took a little bit off by just playing in it with my finger. And then we put our back plate back on. Line up all the screws. There are some retainers there too. And you just put all, let's see, there's 1, 2, the corner ones. With this, I like to peel that little pad off so you can see that it's actually connected. You could have done that in the first place too if you wanted. But make sure that your SD card reader is going to work. So we just got all these screws to put back in, and our back panel is on. Not our back panel, our retaining panel or heat panel, heat sink. All right, that's the back panel. Middle screw is what we need to put in. Little screw for the micro SD card. Again, that's usually under a kickstand. This one was missing it. Then you got your bottom two. Again, this is where organization comes into play. And then finally, we've got our 4 Y or tri-tip screws in each of the 4 corners. The other side has already been done with the middle one, and the top one was missing. So all right, and that's how you do that. Good job. Thank you so much for checking out my video. Please like, subscribe, and comment. And again, thank you for watching. I love you all.